and we should begin in about 2 minutes. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining the South Fulton Coalition this evening. We will be discussing with our candidates for the Secretary of State's position. And I just wanted to give you a little information about the South Fulton Coalition. Now, the mission of the South Fulton Coalition is to implement action programs for the continued improvement, accountability, and integrity of the City of South Fulton government and its elected officials. Tonight, we have our Secretary of State candidates. We will be featuring Michael Owens. Mr. Owens, are you here? Okay, and he should be joining momentarily. On the line, I see that we have Ms. D. Dawkins Hagler. Ms. Hagler, are you here? Are you able to hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Yes, I am here.
All right. And we also have Dr. John Eves. Mr. Eves, Dr. Eves, are you able to hear me? All right. And we will also be having Floyd Griffin. Now, he will be running a little late. He's wrapping up another campaign event. Unfortunately, Jody Heiss, Brad Raffensperger, B. Wynn, and TJ Hudson were not able to join us due to schedule conflicts. So we will just be proceeding with the candidates that we have on the line today. So for our moderator, we will have Yofi Dowell, and I will be assisting him with moderating the online chat. Now, I just want to go over some ground rules. We will be allowing the candidates 3 minutes for opening remarks, 3 minutes for closing remarks, 45 seconds for rebuttals if your name is mentioned in another candidate's response. And any questions that the audience asks you, you have 2 minutes to answer those questions. For the audience, we will be turning it over to you after our moderator gives his remarks. If you want to ask a question to the candidate, please use the reactions option and raise your hand, and we will acknowledge you. So at this time, I would like to turn it over to our moderator for the evening, Yofi Dowell. You have the floor, Mr. Dowell.
Thank you, Rashad, for this opportunity. Again, as Rashad stated, my name is Yofi Dowell. I am a father of two. I have a son that will be going to Westlake next year. I have a daughter who is entering the 7th grade next year at West International in Atlanta. I'm the husband of a bride named Toyin Dowell. We live in District 1 in the city of South Fulton. And my profession is as the founder of a nonprofit organization that is called the Idea Farm Academy. We typically go by the IF Academy. We are a 501c3, and we provide immersive K-12 STEM learning opportunities, training, and activities to bridge the digital divide within underrepresented communities of Atlanta. And we began focusing a lot of our work here in the city. And in doing so, I noticed a great need, and I began to involve myself with a lot of individuals who are community leaders. And in doing so, I became more passionate as a citizen and as a resident to get involved with politics locally and on the state level. And so with that being said, I've connected myself with the South Fulton Coalition, and I've been given the great honor of being a moderator for today's town hall. And with that being said, I'm going to segue and utilize the bulk of this time for our candidates. And first and foremost, I'd like to make mention of the individuals that are here. First and foremost, we have a great showing this evening. I'd like to say thank you to Dr. John Eves for being in attendance. I'd also like to say thank you to Mr. Floyd Griffin. I believe that's him with representing Fresh Communities. Am I correct, sir?
This is Oath Authority. I'm his surrogate. He's wrapping up a rally down here in South Georgia, and he should be on within the next 15 to 20 minutes, but I'll handle anything until he arrives on.
So that's the representative from Mr. Floyd Griffin. I'd like to say good day to Ms. D. Dawkins Hagler as well. Thank you for showing up. And we'd also like to say thank you to Mr. Michael Owens for being involved with this town hall as well. So with that being said, I will allow the town hall to begin. All individuals will have 3 minutes to begin with an opening remark. I will begin in alphabetical order to maintain some fairness with regard to time. And so with that being said, we're going to begin the 3-minute opening remarks with Dr. John Eves. Are you ready to do so, sir? All right, we'd like to unmute your mic, sir.
Well, good evening, South Fulton Coalition. Thank you so much for hosting. I mentioned earlier that I'm multitasking today, so no disrespect. I really appreciate the forum, but I'm kind of also doing an event as well. So John Eves, want to be your next Secretary of State. I am incredibly familiar with South Fulton. I served your area for 11 years as chairman of Fulton County. I lived in South Fulton for 5 years off of Enon Road. My children, my daughter went to Fulton County schools, attended Renaissance as well as Sandtown. And then she went to Mays High School and graduated. I'm a father of 2 children. My son went to Morehouse College, now he's at Duke University. I'm a small business owner, former regional director of Peace Corps, and more importantly, as I mentioned earlier, served as chairman of Fulton County for 11 years and did great things under my leadership. Certainly tried to provide as much quality service to South Fulton in particular. Under my watch as chairman of Fulton County, I did some really good things that I'm proud about. Among them was push for a public-private partnership to save Grady Hospital in 2008, 2009. The hospital was about to close. Did the most broad sweeping criminal justice reform under my watch, partnered with Reverend Raphael Warnock with the first ever expungement summit. We did 2 in the state of Georgia. We expunged the records of over 1,000 young men and women. Did business development, was able to recruit businesses to Fulton County and create jobs in Fulton County. Oversaw about a $20 million grants program to small business owners. And then last but not least, oversaw the largest voting operation as a local government than any in the state of Georgia. $69 million a year, 600,000 people registered to vote, and voter participation and registration increased under my watch. With the first county government to do souls to the poll as well as 3 weeks in advance voting. That's my record. I'm a proven leader, and I'm very proud of what I've done for the county, the region, and also South Fulton. Today, I'm going to go off script a little bit. Today, I went to a forum at Christian City in Union City, and at the forum was Brad Raffensperger. He preceded me. He mentioned that a couple of things that were just crazy about only Americans should be able to vote. And he talked about his book, and he talked about a couple other things that just were completely out of focus. He said he was going to focus, Fulton County was currently under review by the performance committee in terms of it not doing its job, the possible takeover of Fulton County. That's why I'm running for this position. We need leadership in this office right now. We need somebody who's going to protect the vote of Black and brown communities, as well as make sure that voting is accessible to everybody. And so the other thing I'm going to talk about this evening that I think people in South Fulton need to be aware of, voting is important, but also small business development is important as well. The Secretary of State's office is responsible for the corporation of all businesses in the state of Georgia. And there are currently 1.1 million small businesses in Georgia. 1.1 million small businesses in Georgia, but there's a 20% failure rate of first-time business owners, and 35% of the small business owners are Black owned. So under my administration, I would do all that I can to support small business ownership and help them get access to procurement opportunities for the state. So thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Dr. Eves. Mr. Thornton, I'm going to go ahead and go to D. Dawkins and down the line, and we'll save Mr. Floyd Griffin for last, okay? So with that, we've just had an opportunity to have opening statement by Dr. John Eves. We're going to go to D. Dawkins Hagler and have her opening remarks as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you to South Fulton Coalition for hosting this forum on tonight. And thank you to all of you all who are listening to us to hear our platforms. I am D. Dawkins Hagler, the most qualified person to be the Secretary of State. And I want to tell you a little bit about who I am and my background. I am currently married to David Hagler Jr., who is a current colonel in the United States Army. He's stationed at Fort Gordon. We have 4 children. We have Christopher, the oldest one, who is into the music industry, attended West Georgia. The next child is Kristen, who's a graduate of Spelman College, and in May, will be graduating with her MD from Morehouse School of Medicine. We have Hannah, who is a senior at Clayton State, majoring in film production. And then we have the baby Joshua, who is a junior at Morehouse College. So you see that all of our children are doing what they need to do to be productive citizens in Georgia. Now, I'm really proud of some of the things that happened in South Fulton, because during my tenure in the Georgia General Assembly, where I served 9 years, 2 years as the chair of the Women's Caucus, House, Senate, Republican and Democrat, and 4 years as the Black Caucus chair to the largest Black caucus in the nation. One of the things that I had the opportunity to do while I was there was help to incorporate 2 new cities, Stonecrest and South Fulton, and not how people just talk about what they kind of done. No, I worked in tandem with Roger Bruce, because we needed to get it across the threshold that we needed Black people to have their own self-determination, irregardless of how you feel about people having their own cities. We wanted to make sure that the citizens in South Fulton and the citizens in Stonecrest, at that time Lithonia, could vote to decide whether or not they wanted to be cities. And so we had to work it hand in hand to get the legislature to be able to approve it and vote for it. So that's leadership and action and work. Okay. And so that's a little bit about me as far as that regards. So I graduated from South Carolina State University. That's where I with my husband over 30 something years ago. We've been together since undergraduate, been married. Will be 30 years next year. And so I also have a master's degree in public administration, a master's from the ITC at Turner Seminary, and then my PhD work is in political science at Clark Atlanta University. Taught some years at Clark Atlanta University, worked in corporate America, have worked running nonprofits, and I've worked doing different things as far as HR compliance and human resource management, from being a headhunter to helping to organize large organizations, which is key for an office like Secretary of State, which has 5 unique divisions. In my role as a voting rights expert, I worked for years doing voting rights work, where I put millions of dollars into the South, and in particular Georgia, which caused Georgia, the overall state, not a particular county, to be able to do some of the largest voter registration, voter protection, everything from helping people to get to the polls, to advance voting, even to sow to the poll. We put millions of dollars into the South in particular.
You have 30
Georgia.
seconds remaining.
And so I think that my unique experience and being an ordained preacher for 25 years, the faith community, the civil rights community, social and civic organizations, as well as collegiate experience, all of those things, whether I'm in a sorority, because I'm a member of Delta, to Jack and Jill National Council, Negro Women, Eastern Star, you name the gamut. I am fully entrenched in the Black community, and I am ready on day one to execute the job of Secretary of State. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mrs. D. Dawkins-Hagler, for that opening remarks. With that being said, we've had an opportunity to hear from Dr. John Eves, Mrs. D. Dawkins-Hagler, and now we'd like to give the floor to Mr. Michael Owens, and we will come back to you, sir, Mr. Floyd Grimm.
Thank you for that, Mr. Dowell. Again, good evening, everyone. My name is Michael Owens. I'd like to thank the South Fulton Coalition for pulling this forum together. It's vitally important that we have opportunity for the members and people in South Fulton to hear directly from the candidates that wish to represent them. I'm running for Secretary of State because we must have someone that has the skills, the experience, the expertise, not just in voting rights, the ability to defend democracy, to bolster our business. And from a perspective where it's not just a hashtag, it's not just something we can put on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter, but someone who's actually done the work specifically when it comes to the role of Secretary of State and what this next Secretary of State is going to be asked to do, both from a business expectation and also for the people of the state of Georgia and residents of South Fulton. I don't have to explain to you all why it's so important when it comes to voting rights and why we have to be represented at the ballot and what that means. You all have gone through the same exact things I have. Many of us have struggled with trying to figure out if we're actually registered to vote or not. Some of us have been kicked off because we haven't voted since President Obama ran for president. Others may have moved from one apartment to the next. And some have been residents the whole time, and for some reason, they just found themselves no longer registered to vote. I want to be clear about this. I'm the only candidate running for Secretary of State on either side of the aisle who have actual experience, not just talking about change, but has actually enacted the type of change that's going to be required in the Secretary of State's office. Many of you know me as the former chairman of the Democratic Party in Cobb County, where I was elected twice, and during that time flipped 12 seats red to blue, laid out a strategic plan that helped put Lee Smith back into Congress, and made many aspects along to lower offices in every aspect of government. However, what doesn't get mentioned as much is about how we expanded access to the voting rolls, how we added more early voting locations, how we made sure people had more early voting hours so they could actually go have their voices heard. Again, this doesn't get talked about as much, but in my tenure as chairman of Democratic Committee in Cobb County, we were able to expand access to voters for more than 486,000 voters and had a direct impact on more than 40,000 people showing up at the polls. That's real work, that's real solutions on being able to get things done. I joined the Marine Corps when I was 17 years old during the first Persian Gulf War. I was trained in communications, engineering, and counterterrorism. Since then, I've had the pleasure of going to North Carolina A&T State University, getting my master's degree from Georgia Tech, getting my doctorate from Cal University in International Business, and then doing my postdoctorate work at Harvard Kennedy School of Government, where I was participated in the first Emerging Global Leaders program ever. I've also spent time studying national security with colonels, lieutenant colonels, and the rest at the Army War College's National Security Program. I'm ready for this work. Domestically, I've worked at companies in Atlanta like Coca-Cola, Delta, Ernst & Young, leading critical infrastructure systems, leading cybersecurity initiatives to make sure that all of our information is safe. Matter of fact, I worked right off of Godby Road for several years in a data center that most people wouldn't even know, right off of Old National, helping to make sure that the airport and the security of all of our passengers went through without any problem. As Secretary of State, I want to bring this wealth of experience to the table and ensure that everyone's voices are heard, our elections are secure, and we're able to bolster business. Because I love this the phrase of we're going to make sure of that Georgia's the #1 state to do business in. But I want to make sure that Georgia's #1 state to do business in for all people. That includes Black and brown businesses, women-owned businesses, veteran-owned businesses alike. I enjoy having the opportunity to speak with you guys tonight. Looking forward to the questions, and thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Mr. Michael Owens. Again, we're going to close out the opening remarks. We've had an opportunity from Dr. John Eves. We also had an opportunity from Mrs. D. Dawkins Hagler. We've just heard from Mr. Michael Owens. We're going to close out with Mr. Floyd Griffin, and I will yield the floor to you, sir.
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting me. Hello to South Fulton. I am a former state senator, Floyd Griffin, and former mayor of Millersville. I am a Tuskegee alum graduate, and the reason I mention that is because I majored in building construction. That is one area that the Secretary of State has very deep responsibilities from the standpoint of licenses and businesses and corporations. I also was commissioned a second lieutenant in the Army, spent 23 years in the Army, and the first 3 or 4 years I was assigned to a very important role in South Vietnam, where I flew helicopters and commanded engineer construction programs. I had multiple executive level experience in the military. I received my master's degree from Florida Institute of Technology in Contracts and Procurement Management. I am a graduate of the National War College out of Washington, D.C. I have had executive level positions in the Army and the Pentagon, where I have managed and built budgets for over multi-million dollars and defended those budgets at the congressional subcommittees that I was responsible for in my program. I retired as a colonel from the Army and moved back to my hometown of Millersville, where I joined my family business, which is a funeral service business, where I'm a licensed embalmer, licensed funeral home director, and licensed our business. And after the demise of my family, my sister and I became the owners of that business. So I understand how executives operate in the extent of businesses. When I came back, I also ran for Georgia State Senate, and I won that seat against a white incumbent, becoming the first African American in modern times to be elected in a majority white rural legislative district, and the first Black senator of the 25th district. I ran for lieutenant governor in 1998 with among about 7 other individuals, and 4 of us were from the Senate. One of those individuals was Mark Taylor, who was the lieutenant governor, and he won that race. We were friends then, and we maintained friends over the years. Mark has come out and endorsed my candidate and stated that Floyd Griffin is the most qualified person to run for this position at this point in time. I'm asking you all to support my candidacy. I may not be on too long because I'm out on a 30-bus tour around the state, and I have another appointment, and those were set up before this Zoom, so I'm glad to be on. And I ask y'all to check my website, floydforgeorgia.com, and I am the best qualified and experienced candidate to be the next Secretary of State. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much for our candidates in their opening remarks. We're going to now open the floor to questions, and we'll pose these questions. And as Rashard stated, with regard to responses, the responses will be 2-minute time limits. And if there is a response in which a candidate refers to another candidate, that candidate will have 45 seconds as an opportunity to do a rebuttal. So with that being said, I will allow the moderators to pose the questions, and we'll give you an opportunity to respond to them.
As a reminder to everyone out in the public, please use the reactions option and raise your hand so that we can acknowledge you to ask a question.
And if it would not be too forward, I'd like to give the audience an opportunity, and I'll start the questions if it's not too forward. I'm an individual who's a small business owner, and in fact, I have a nonprofit organization. And so, I like to ask the question. I like to start the question from a perspective of business. One of the things that I found interesting from a business perspective is, I went through the Secretary of State to file my business, but I found out during the pandemic when I applied for resources that I was unable to qualify for resources in the city in which I do business, in which I reside, because I didn't file for a business license in that city. And so there's a major disconnect there. How, as candidates, and are you aware as candidates of this disconnect from a local and a state level? And how can we find ways to resolve these disconnects that local business owners may have with regard to business ownership in the state of Georgia?
So, Mr. Moderator, I'm not sure how you're going to direct the questions. Is it specifically to a person?
I'll let's go alphabetical, because I wanted to give the audience an opportunity to raise hands and ask questions. So I can repeat it and just give each four, or if that's each of you all an opportunity, 2 minutes to respond. Would that be ideal?
I just want to know the order, that's all.
Okay, so I'll do, and we'll do this through the conversation. I'm going to maintain alphabetical order, just to keep it, on a fair level. I'll start up the aisle, going A through Z, and then the next question goes Z through A, just to make it fair the entire way. Okay, all agree? Oh, there it is. So again, I had an experience as a small business owner in which I discovered a difference that I was unaware of. I went through the Secretary of State to establish my business. And then in the process of accessing funds during COVID, I realized that there was an impact not having, established my business locally as opposed to the state level. Why is there a disconnect in that reality? And it may not be something many individuals come to find out, but if you are a candidate, I'd like to hear that response. So we'll start out with Dr. Eves, and then we'll go to Mrs. D. Dawkins, Hagler, then Mike Owens, and then Floyd Griffin.
You are not alone in your experience. So I'm a small business owner as well. In fact, I have 2 small businesses. I live in the city of Atlanta now, and I had to go through their licensing processes, which was very cumbersome, bureaucratic. I have another business that I operate out of Cobb County, completely different, seamless process. So as your Secretary of State, what I'm going to do, since you already as a business owner have to register every year, why not develop a one-stop shop concept at the Secretary of State's office in terms of being able to meet the licensing requirements of multiple jurisdictions, whether it's city, county, across the state of Georgia. Let the Secretary of State's office handle that, collect the fees, and if necessary, can kick the fees to the respective jurisdictions where the John Does want to do business in multiple jurisdictions. It's an easy fix in terms of developing the mechanism. It's just a matter of developing a partnership where the other municipalities and county governments, et cetera, will allow this type of cooperative. As chairman of Fulton County, I have experience in supporting small businesses. We had a creative arts program, $5 million a year. We had our first grants program for nonprofits that was about $10 million a year. And then we had a human services grant program for human service providers. So I have the experience, I get it. I hear your story, I've experienced myself. Government can be a lot more efficient. The Secretary of State's office can be a conduit for allowing business owners like you to do work in multiple jurisdictions and only have one application.
Thanks so much. And we'll move to Mrs. D. Dawkins Hagler for her response.
And thank you. That's a very good question. I'm a business owner myself, and if people ever take the time to go to the Secretary of State's office, I probably have about 15 to 20 corporations listed. So one of the things that the Secretary of State's office does have is it has the ability to be able to educate the public on what is needed if you have a local business versus how you register with the state. And just like the Secretary of State overall coordinates, oversees the Board of Elections and have 159 different counties that they oversee as far as voting, it could do the same thing. It could work with all of the counties to make sure that the offices, especially as it is with businesses and business licenses, are working together so that you don't have all of this cumbersome paperwork that you're doing over and over and over again. Well, that's because the Secretary of State's focus has not been on making it easier for business owners. The focus has been on trying to take away people's voting rights and to make sure that the people who are at the top of the totem pole gets what they need from the Secretary of State, negating all of the other people who are business owners in this state. When you look at Georgia, it has over 1 million different people who are registered as corporations, with that being about and 30% right around Black, but that's just like our population. And time and dedicated funds have not been used to educate our population. And so what needs to be done is there needs to be some type of streamlined process, but that also takes auditing. So I can't say what all I would definitely do until I go in and audit, but I do know that there are dedicated funds that can be used in the Secretary of State's office so that people will not be confused. Because even if you go on the website now, which has just been changed again, it creates chaos. People are confused. They don't know what to do, when to do it. And it should have been buttons on there. If you have applied for a license here, how do you make sure that that license is applicable in your county or your city, or these are the steps, or let's streamline this and it's a one-stop shop like many other states use.
Thank you so much, Mrs. D. Dawkins Haven, for your response. We've heard from two candidates. We're going to give Mr. Michael Owens, we're going to give Mr. Floyd Griffin an opportunity. I forgot we were going to go alphabetical order, and I made that misstep because Mr. Otha was in our last session. But Mr. Floyd Griffin, could you please provide us a response, sir?
Thank you very much. You know, I believe in understanding and accepting reality. And the reality is, the way you ask your question, I do not have an answer for that, nor have I experienced that as a business person. But what I'm planning on putting in place are several roundtables. And one of the roundtables is going to be a small business roundtable, and have people like yourself to serve on that roundtable to help me identify problems and challenges with the question that you have and other questions where we can fix those things. I don't believe in gaslighting people and telling them all the things that I'm going to do, because I've never been in the Secretary of State's office, nor have I had the problems that the problem that you are talking about. But what I can assure of you is that there are some challenges out there. I know what some of those are. I'm not going to try to solve them on this program tonight, but I am going to be, that's going to be one of my top issues, is to put in place a roundtable to discuss that. Now, I do agree with Sister D that website, the Secretary of State website, you got to be a genius to go on there and try to figure out what's going on. We need to spend as much time as possible to make that website a friendly website where people know how to navigate that. And I also definitely will put in a educational program for business people where they can understand how to get their licensing without going through all of these hoops. So, which I plan on putting a satellite office in Macon, Georgia,
30 seconds
for
remaining.
me, where I'm located in Miller, Georgia, satellite office where people can come and visit me there. And that's where the licensing division is located. And I'll be there to monitor what the licensing divisions are doing. And by the way, I'm going to have to go off pretty soon. And if I'm off, I want to thank you all for having me on. And I please ask you to vote for Floyd Griffin on my birthday, May the 24th.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mr. Griffin. And with that response, we'll pass the microphone over to Mr. Michael Owens for his response.
Well, thank you for that. Floyd's made his request to vote for him on his birthday. I'm going to ask that you guys listen to what I have to say today on my birthday, since today is my birthday. So I didn't lead in with that, but I'm happy to take time to be with you guys this evening.
Is the day your birthday?
It really is. Today is my birthday. So
happy birthday.
I'm spending my
Birthday,
birthday
Michael.
with fellow candidates and lovely people from South Fulton. So now mind you, my kids are right off screen, ready for me to get off this thing. But we're going to pay it justice. We're going to do what we need to do tonight. But I did want to say that since Floyd mentioned it. You know, to address your question, Mr. Dow, my mother, I tell the story, my mother, she's retired, she's a retired nurse, and she loves to make jewelry out of beads, you know, and she's been doing it for quite some time, gotten quite good at it. So she decided several months ago that she wanted to sell them on Etsy, and she wanted to sell them at pop-up shops or whatever. And she went to the Secretary of State's website to start her a little business. I think 3 days later, and probably a lot more gray hair, she was so frustrated, she called me going, Michael, what the heck do I do? How do I fill this thing out to start a business? Mind you, she wasn't getting seed money. She wasn't trying to hire employees. She just wanted to start a business to make beads and jewelry for her family and friends and to sell online. So I say that to say I totally understand. I myself also am a small business owner. I started my first business when I was 24 years old, out of my garage, selling used computers from IBM basically, and built it to a fairly sizable company where people depended on me for their paychecks. I since then have had companies in several different states. I can't tell you Georgia needs help, you know, but what I can also say, 59 counties, there is challenges that when it comes to making sure all this lines up. No, it's not done because it's not easy. And we shouldn't pretend that it's easy, right? Because every county, every city has their own requirements around having a business license and what to conduct and do in there. When most people go to start a business, they go to the IRS, they get a EIN number, and that the state of Georgia requires for you to have. The business license for the county and the type of business you have, that comes afterwards. So I do agree with D is that we do have to have more education. The part of the aspect of the Secretary of State's office, we have to become a Secretary of State's office that's just not functional, right? That it's not focused on just transactional things. It's not about being transactional. It's about helping businesses, primarily, you know, we have to do as much as we can to help Black and brown owned businesses because we don't have the generational institutional knowledge that a lot of other people come with. So just filling out paperwork is not good enough. We're going to have to turn that on its head.
Mr. Owens, you're at time.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Awesome. I see some hands from the South Fulton Coalition and from Rashard Snelling. I'd like to offer them an opportunity to ask their question.
Yeah, thank you. So there was a question that was posed to the coalition that they wanted me to ask. What options does the Secretary of State's office have to prevent our county officials from overseeing our election? If they are a candidate in the election, and that question is for all candidates.
And we're going to go in reverse order this time. And so that
I didn't hear the question. I'm sorry.
Can you repeat the question, please?
Sure. What options does the Secretary of State's office have to ensure that our Fulton County leadership is not overseeing elections that they may be a candidate in?
Okay.
All right, candidates.
So initially,
everybody understands
for the 2018 election with Brian Kemp as Secretary of State overseeing obviously the election with him and Stacey Abrams. Understand that could potentially happen at a local level if you have county election officials that are running for office, and how that could impact it. That could happen, I suppose, if they were elected official and they decided to run for state rep or state senator or something like that. There is, as far as I know, there's no law to recuse themselves. You can't hold two different offices at the same time. You can't run for two different offices at the same time, but you can keep your current office while running for the next. So I don't know that there is a provision within state law as it currently exists to be able to force someone not to do that. But what I can tell you, a lot of times, which we found out in the past election, which I mentioned with Stacey Abrams, is that there's certain things called the quorum, right, that we have to have. And there's a level of integrity that we have to have as public officials, as community leaders, and as people seeking higher office. Myself, without a doubt, I would recuse myself. Hopefully you're building the bench. As you're building a team, you have someone to step in, and it's not one person runs an election, right? So the idea that you couldn't step away if you were running for another office, so that's where I stand. I mean, as far as I know, there's not state law, but people in the community understand if you're trying to oversee your own election, that's probably a pretty good indicator that you don't need that next seat you're running for.
Thank you so much, Mr. Michael Owens. We're going to give Mr. Floyd Griffin an opportunity, and we'll follow by Mrs. D. Dawkins and then Dr. John Eves.
Will you repeat the question again, sir? Will you repeat the question again?
Yes. The question was, what options does the Secretary of State's office have to oversee elections if a candidate is running in that election at the Fulton County Commission level?
Well, it's a very simple response to that question. The Secretary of State doesn't have any responsibility over that person running. As Michael stated, and I think Dee and I can, hopefully we can agree on this since we served in the legislature, that there's nothing in the law that prohibits that being done. I ran for lieutenant governor several years ago, and I remained as a senator. I was in the Senate. I remained as a senator for the remainder of that term while I was running. But if there had been a law in place that asked me to or required me to resign, I would have done that. But to just directly answer your question, the Secretary of State does not have any responsibility in dealing with that particular question.
All right, thank you so much. We're going to give Mrs. D. Dawkins Hagler an opportunity to answer, and then we'll follow it up by allowing Dr. John Eves his opportunity as well.
So thank you for that question. So this was multifaceted, a lot of levels to this question. So first of all, the only person who really can oversee their own election, kinda, is the Secretary of State. And let me tell you why I say that. Only because the Secretary of State is over 5 divisions and elections is one of them. And by law, they are the chief election officer in the state. By nature of their position, they're supposed to oversee the entire statewide election. However, this did not just start, because you have to understand that most of the Secretary of States that we've had who ran for re-election have always overseen their elections. So there's nothing in state law that says that they cannot do it. And this happened when Democrats were Secretary of State, as well as when Republicans were Secretary of State. I think the problem came in when Brian Kemp was running for governor, and he was running against Stacey Abrams, and it appeared that he was overseeing an election in which he was a part of. But the same thing occurred when he was the Secretary of State, running for Secretary of State in 2014 against Doreen Carter, and in 2010 against Georgiana Singfield. That was the same office. Now, what he could have done, because the office is so huge, is recuse himself from that part of the overall election portion, just enough so that the election could take place, because he still had 4 other divisions that he had to look over. But countywide, the Board of Elections, not anyone else, the registrar, I'm gonna say it one more time, the registrar oversees elections, not elected officials. And so a lot of people take credit for doing things that the registrar office actually does. And so registrars are not elected officials, so they're not overseeing their own elections. So I don't think that would be a problem in local municipal elections. So basically, I think if indeed elected officials could oversee their own elections, that would be problematic. But in this case, they don't, except for that. It's not even except if you're in the role of Secretary of State and you run for anything, whether it's running for Secretary of State again or running for any other office, and you are the Secretary of State at that time, you will, by nature of your position, supposedly be overlooking an election. So yes, we have to make sure that we have procedures in place so that it will not look like you have an advantage over the other voters because you are sitting in that at the time of the election. Did you hear me?
No, I didn't get the last part. Could you repeat that last part? I
I
apologize.
said, so that if you have any other further questions about that, please, you can talk to me because I've actually dealt with this directly and not just from the sidelines. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mrs. D. Dawkins Hagler, for your answer. And now I'll ask Dr. Eves to answer as well.
So it's a very interesting question. So I'm going to deal with it in two ways. So Fulton County, since you brought Fulton County up, Fulton County has a local election board that has two appointees from the Democratic Party, two appointees from the Republican Party, and the chair is appointed or nominated and approved for chairmanship of that local election board. They recommend policy. They also supervise the Director of Registration and Elections. Director of Registration and Elections oversees the department. The Board of Commissioners can give advice, can give some thoughts, can give some feedback, and hold them accountable, and they fund the budget. All right, so I want to be clear about that. So the local election boards are actually overseen. So the local elections are overseen by the election board and the department. The other part of your question, which I think is really good, is the issue of the Secretary of State. So Karen Handel, who preceded me as chairman of Fulton County, she became Secretary of State in 2007. When she ran for governor, if there's anything that I agreed with her on, probably the only thing is that she resigned and ran for governor and avoided the conflict that Kemp posed when he was Secretary of State and ran for governor. So she did the honorable thing. She resigned from that position. So I think that's a multi-layered question that the brother asked. And so I wanted to deal with it in terms of the county administration as well as the Secretary of State's office, or the person running for another office or his own office in terms of the election.
Thank you so much. And we're going to reverse the order again. So the question will be posed to you, Dr. John Eves first, then Mrs. D. Dawkins Hagler, followed by Mr. Floyd Griffin, and closing with Mr. Mike Owens. And so the next question, South Fulton Coalition.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. This next question comes from Mr. Marcus Coleman, and he wants to know what the candidates think about the legislation that was signed by the governor today. And if you're not familiar with it, today Governor Kemp signed a bill that takes further steps to ensure secure and fair elections and enhance criminal case data exchanges to reduce criminal case backlogs. If you need me to read the whole thing, please let me know.
I believe Mr. Coleman, he wanted to add a little clarity to that question. Mr.
Okay,
Coleman,
Mr. Coleman, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Well, good evening. No, actually, I just wanted you guys to read it, but good evening. I appreciate it. Appreciate the forum. You guys have been very consistent. But yeah, if you could read a little bit more, because it gives the GBI power to investigate and also to subpoena election information. So, I mean, honestly, I would think they would be aware of it, but if not, again, what you read, but again, more specifically, the oversight now and the power given to the GBI.
Okay, thank you. I'll go ahead and read the whole thing. Today, Governor Kemp signed a bill that takes further steps to ensure secure and fair elections and enhance criminal case data exchanges to reduce criminal case backlogs. Building on the strong common sense measures in our Election Integrity Act of 2021, this new law allows us to engage highly qualified personnel from the Georgia Bureau of Investigation to insist in ensuring our elections are secure and fair, said Governor Brian Kemp. In addition to signing this bill into law, he also allocated $504,116 in fiscal year 2023 funds for these positions. Furthermore, and thanks to the leadership of Lieutenant Governor Geoff Duncan, Senator Bo Hatchett, and Speaker Ralston, this bill will help us improve communication protocols within the judiciary to keep our communities and crime victims safe. When communication breakdowns exist between law enforcement, crime victims, prosecutors, judges, and potential employers, then justice cannot be effectively served. And we commend all who worked to pass this bill and improve this reporting system. Candidates' thoughts on that legislation?
Yes, sir, Dr. John Neves.
So this is all about, first of all, it's a very political legislation that was passed and signed by the governor. It's designed to play to the base. It's designed to reinforce the big lie that voting is fraudulent, and it's designed to heighten the atmosphere of intimidation for those voters who may be on the margins of society, who may not necessarily be as quick to want to vote. And this is just one other shenanigan this Republican legislature and this governor are both employing to try to shave off just a few Black and brown votes so that they can stop Black and brown people and Democrats from being elected. So it is part of a scheme. It is completely unnecessary. First of all, the sheriff's department of each county is responsible for providing security for elections already. There's no need for the GBI to be brought into this. And so again, it's unnecessary, it's political, and it is from the playbook of a bygone era in the South, where law enforcement or any sort of intimidation was used to prevent Black people from voting. And so it's unnecessary. And as Secretary of State, I'm going to speak out against this type of BS that's happening in the state.
Thank you so much, Dr. Eves. I'm going to pass the floor to Mrs. D. Dawkins Hagler and allow her a response as well.
Okay, thank you for this question. So this question is kind of loaded, and I'm going to start and give some context and history to bring us to where we are and how that got passed. So in 2010, in Brooks County in Quitman, Georgia, there were 10 Black women who were arrested for registering people to vote and using the advanced voting process. They did it because it had been so successful when the Republicans brought it around in 2005. So in 2010, we got wind. This is when I say we, this is us in the Black caucus in the legislature at that time. These Black women were being charged with felonies for using a system that we had approved that the Republicans were using to win, to keep seats. What happened was the Black women flipped seats. So at that time, Brian Kemp was the Secretary of State. And the case at that time had to be brought to the Secretary of State in order to have further investigations, including that by the GBI. And so what he did was he looked at the case and said that it had merit and allowed them to proceed with investigating the entire process. And as a result, he ruled in favor of the Republicans on that school board in Brooks County in Quitman that said that there was some type of voter fraud that had occurred because the claim came from the Republican members of the school board. So what happened was these women had to stay and litigate protraction for years. Like they kept going to court. We could not get it dropped. We were spending resources. We were trying to make sure that they had a fair day and fair trial because all they did was use what the law said that they could do. And they were facing these charges simply because people made allegations into voter fraud. Now, why is this dangerous? Fast forward, that was 2010. It took us upward of 4.5 years to get all of those charges dropped against these women who had done nothing. So now this bill goes a step further. Before, you had to go to the Secretary of State's office and get permission from the Secretary of State, who at that time was supposed to oversee all election issues in the state of Georgia. But now it skips the Secretary of State, because if you notice in 2021, after we were able to have a majority, basically what I would do is do my best to work around that system, because I was trying to build it up for you all so you could understand the process. But now this is an extreme form of voter protection, voter intimidation, that does not even have to go to the Secretary of State to get approval first for investigations. It can go straight to the GBI. And so it's missing a lot of steps. And the Proud Boys or anybody else can come and say someone has committed voter fraud. And not only will they, vote might not count, but they may go to jail and serve prison time. So it's dangerous.
Thank you so much, Mrs. D. Dawkins-Hagelin, for your response. I don't see Mr. Floyd Griffin. Is Mr. Floyd Griffin still here? I don't see him. So what that means is, Mr. Michael Owens, is your answer, it's your opportunity to answer. And so I yield.
I'm going to say this very, very clearly. Making it harder for people to vote does not increase election security. It has been something that's been used time and time again. We've seen it not only in Georgia, across the country over the last several years, calling bills as far as election integrity, increasing election security. It does none the like. It does actually what's intended to do, to keep Black and brown voters from voting. And that's exactly what this is. It is red meat for the base, ginning up their electorate for the primary and for the general election is exactly what it does. Look, I've fought this before. The GBI under the leadership of Vic Reynolds has overstepped their reach many times. I recall back to when there was supposed gang crisis throughout the state, and there was thousands and hundreds of thousands of gangs, and that was really an effort to lock up more Black and brown kids. And so we have to be careful, very careful, when we look at these new laws, particularly having the GBI overstep their boundaries. Look, the Secretary of State already has the power to delve into any election related issues that they may find. Under this new law, it gives the GBI the ability to step in and investigate issues. It's a duplicative service. We already have it within the Secretary of State's office, where there are plenty of investigators that can do this work. Look, election fraud, the big lie, whatever you want to call it, is something that's continually used to strip more and more of our ability to have fair and free elections away. I will not stand for it. I will call it out in every instant. It's not right. The GBI also played a significant role in elections. I worked with the military, with the United States Marine Corps and the military as a whole, ensuring our elections stayed clear in 2020. The GBI has no role in going around, harassing people and intimidating people when it comes to our elections. Thank you.
Thank you so much, all candidates. And we're going to reverse order again. So Mr. Owens, you'll be the first to respond, followed by Mrs. D. Dawkins-Hagelin and Dr. John Eves. And see, I see another hand with another question as well. So South Fulton Coalition, fire away.
Okay, this question is from Mr. Mel Keaton. Excuse me. What will each candidate do to engage the city of South Fulton? Because you know that 100,000 votes can turn an election.
So I think what we'll do to engage voters in South Fulton, I'll continue to do what I've done for the last 10 years, get out and speak with people and meet people where they are, ensuring we're in their communities. I have family that's all throughout South Fulton. I've mentioned before, I worked in South Fulton off Old National on Godby Road for years. I've built relationships. It's integral to our campaign strategy. Without going into too much of it, we got other people, other candidates' ears here listening tonight. So I can't go into all the secret sauce, right, about how I want to get the majority of those 100,000 votes. But rest assured, we have a plan to engage, to continue to work with, and continue to, again, look, this election is not about me. It's not about Michael Owens. It's about you. It's about the people of South Fulton. I'm a servant when it comes to this. I joined the Marine Corps when I was 17 years old to serve. I ran, was chairman of the Democratic Party in Cobb to serve. I'm running now to serve. So, I'm going to make myself available. I'm going to continue to show up, continue to explain to people why I'm the best candidate. And then, you guys are going to choose who your next Secretary of State is. But trust me, all right? So trust to believe. Now you say it is that I will do my part. And I do think it's important to acknowledge the candidates that are here tonight, speaking to the people of South Fulton, because it's important.
Thanks so much, Mr. Michael Owens. With that, I yield the floor to Mrs. D. Dawkins-Hagler.
Thank you. I've never been called Mrs. so much in my life, and it sounds so good to my ears. I'm not even kidding around. Usually people say honorable, doctor, reverend, but I like this Mrs. So, I'm gonna have to give that to the colonel. So Michael, I thought you was gonna give me your secret so I can go out and employ them in this election. That's what I thought Michael was gonna do, but you didn't do it. Okay, so anyway, let me just say this. So I agree with Michael. We don't want to give our secrets, but I'm going to say this on the record. I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing, reaching out to those in South Fulton. I believe that Black people have the right to speak and vote for who they want. One of the reasons why I tried to make sure that the citizens of South Fulton can even vote for their own cityhood. Now, that being said, if I am the best candidate, regardless of what the men say I am, but in the event that Michael, John, or Floyd, and I'm being very clear what I just said because I said what I said, if one of them, best me, I will support them, and that is all. Because I am very clear that this position at this time needs to go to people who actually represent the larger community of the base of voters in the Democratic Party. A lot of people are afraid to say the things that I say, and that's okay, because sometimes it takes courage and the testicular will to do and say the right things. But I just would like to say, I applaud these other Black men for being here and showing up. This race will be one that, we are out working, paving the ground, grassroots, but the party has already kind of decided who they want to anoint to this position. So I hope you all are paying attention and really seriously consider and look at the 4 Black candidates that are running for Secretary of State. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Mrs. D. Dawkins-Hagler. And Dr. Johnese, we'd like to hear your response as well.
I think that's a really good question, whoever asked it. And I'm not going to necessarily speak directly to what I'm going to do in terms of getting votes. I'm going to speak a little bit more futuristic in terms of what I want to do to be a partner with South Fulton. I've served this area for 11 years, and I think that South Fulton as a city can be a shining example for the state in terms of how we can operate as a city. I know that there are some political dynamics that are, being worked through as a young city, but you have 90% plus African-American population, relatively high socioeconomical composite of the city. You have some degree of an arts infrastructure that was a product that was produced by Fulton County. You have small business owners who are in South Fulton. You have a lot of land that is undeveloped. You have access to the Fulton Industrial Boulevard. And so I see myself as a Secretary of State who can work with South Fulton, as I will other cities, to assist them to be more functioning, to work with citizens who are in the small business sector to be able to be stronger small business owners, develop something called the creative arts industry and cultivate the arts in South Fulton, to make South Fulton a destination of choice for people to visit, as this predominantly Black city, 90% population, that could be a shining example. So I would like to use all the resources, the know-how that I have as an executive and as the head of Secretary of State's office to really work with South Fulton to make it an even better city and even more functioning than it is right now.
Thanks so much, Dr. Johnese. With that, we have an opportunity for another question from South Fulton Coalition.
I apologize. The next question is this. Given the events of the past presidential election, how would you, as the elected Secretary of State, handle election interference from a sitting president of the United States?
Reverse in order, so that means Dr. John Neves, you'll be first, followed by Mrs. D. Dawkins-Hagler and Michael Owens to conclude.
I mean, that's a pretty straightforward question. I think that Brad Raffensperger has done is one thing he's done right. One thing among many things he's done wrong. That was it. And he talks about integrity. Well, hell, if he complied with Trump, he'd be in jail. So he was just doing his job. All right. So as Secretary of State, I certainly will defend the right of the vote and the whole elections process, from the president down to the person on the street corner, because I believe that voting is important, sacred, and I believe in fairness. I often tell people that this position is the most apolitical of all the constitutional offices. It is a position where everyone, regardless of race, partisan affiliation, location, should have the ability to vote, and the vote should be defended regardless of who's casting the vote. And so that's my belief and that's my posture. And so whether it's current President Biden or any future president or anybody below that individual, I'm going to defend the president, defend the vote, defend the elections process, and do all that I can to maintain the integrity of the process and not allow for it to be manipulated.
Thank you for your response, and I yield the floor to Mrs. D. Dawkins-Hagler.
Could you repeat the question? My internet is doing some crazy stuff over here in my house.
Yes. Given the events of the past presidential election, how would you, as the elected Secretary of State, handle election interference from a sitting president of the United States?
Okay, that's a very good question, and thank you, because I was sitting here just imagining what would happen if Donald Trump had called me instead of Brad Raffensperger to say, can you find me some votes? And so, first of all, we need to still make sure that District Attorney Fani Willis prosecutes that and investigates to the fullest of the law. And if there is any type of impropriety, that she needs to prosecute his behind. But anyway, I think that we should make sure that our elections are free and clear from interference, whether it is from the Democratic Party, the Republican Party, the Proud Boys, the KKK, anybody, or sitting presidents who want to impede the right to free and fair access to the ballot box, because that is one of our most sacred rights, and we have to protect it at all costs. And this is why integrity matters. Integrity matters because people knew President Trump was a charlatan. They knew he would do and say anything to win. And we now have candidates that now do the exact same thing running for other offices. So we need to, and if they do it, running for other offices, they'll do it in the position that they're currently running for. So what I would just simply say is we need parameters in place that you cannot tamper with the process. And now what has happened, based on that 2021 election integrity bill, SB 202, they've taken a lot of power away from the Secretary of State's office and given it to people of the General Assembly to make these decisions, and others who put people in place who can determine whose vote will really count and whose will not. And that is a very dangerous thing that is happening here in the state of Georgia. That means they can remove election boards. That means they can stagger election boards. They can null and void votes. That doggone 2021 election integrity bill had no integrity whatsoever. And that is what I would work to circumvent as a Secretary of State, because one thing that education and work experience cannot give us as a whole is common sense. Common sense and that good old black mother wit that I got, that I inherited from my grandmother and my great grandmother now. See, that will help you circumvent the bad laws that's gonna come up. So that's all I got on that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mrs. D. Dawkins-Hagler, and I will yield the floor to Mr. Michael Owens.
So I think as Dr. Eve said, first of all, when it comes to Brad Raffensperger, I will give him nor cookie nor cake for doing his job, right? And making sure that he told Trump what he could do. I would do the exact same thing, but I'm a Marine Corps veteran, so I'd probably add a few more choice words to my response to the president. The problem is that Brad Raffensperger, Secretary Raffensperger, has made the elections questionable from the very beginning. Before a single vote was cast, he planted a seed when he started that voter fraud task force back in April of 2020, when there was no widespread voter fraud. He planted the seed that there would be fraud in that election. So between that, and both with him and the previous Secretary, Brian Kemp, also made the elections questionable by data breaches, by not keeping our information secure, by having breaches and data leaks that broke down the integrity of our elections, by not being able to keep our information safe. So we build trust through building the process. I do that. I do that for a living. After the world's largest cybersecurity breach in 2018 at Equifax, I was recruited to leave Ernst & Young and go and help head up the cybersecurity division for Equifax, protecting all of our information. I was listed one of the top 100 cybersecurity professionals in the world at doing what I do in protecting data and coming up with policies and schemas to do that. I'm a certified information security auditor. I understand end to end how to build systems and make sure that they have trust and recordability and matrix built in. In 2018, I went to Ukraine when Russia had first invaded Crimea the first time. And so I've worked with Ukrainian officials. So I've worked internationally on the same issue of how we can make our systems more safe. And locally, even right in your neighborhood and with the city of South Fulton, I've worked with the municipal government there to make sure that you have secure information and that your technology systems are working correctly.
30 seconds remaining.
As far away as Ukraine to right here in South Fulton, I've done the work. I'll continue to do it as your next Secretary of State.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And with that, I will have another question with the South Fulton Coalition.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Moderator. And I'll continue to ask questions if no one else is. These next two questions are very short, so I'm going to ask them together. The first one is a loaded question. Who do you support for the governor's race this year? Second question, if there's a runoff for the Secretary of State race, can we count on you to return for another town hall forum with the South Fulton Coalition?
And we're reversing the order, so that'll be first with you, Mr. Michael Owens, then Mrs. D. Dawkins Hagler, and finally with Dr. John Eves.
So who do I support in this year's gubernatorial race? I think that's very clear. It should be, hopefully. I'm supporting Leader Stacey Abrams. It's time that we have the first Black woman governor in the country. And it's as simple as that. We have to have a Democratic governor, just as we have to have a Democratic lieutenant governor. And very important, we have a Democratic Secretary of State. As much as I would love to say that, it should be nonpartisan in nature, the work of the Secretary of State is largely nonpartisan, but we have to have a Democratic Secretary of State. If there's a runoff, I will absolutely commit to coming back to South Fulton. Particularly, and my hope is that the South Fulton Coalition will host another forum and give us an opportunity to come back if this goes to a runoff.
Thank you so much for your response, and I'll yield the floor to Mrs. D. Dawkins Hagler.
Thank you. So it's very simple for me. I'm going to support Stacey Abrams, full stop. That is the Democrat that we have on the ballot. Now, let me just be very clear, because I am a strong Democrat, but Democrats in and of itself is not the end all to be all, but that is where we are as a people. So that is the conduit that we're going to have to use in this election, because Democrats are far better than anything else that's going right now. And I have been a Democrat all my life. Now, as it relates to Secretary of State, hopefully I will win this election and I won't have to come back for a runoff. But if I have to come back for a runoff, I promise y'all I will come back and visit y'all, the South Fulton Coalition, to state my claim and to push it a little bit further. So I think that's as important, that we always focus people and make time for people to hear from us and to seek us out, and not just during election time. This is why people can honestly say, when I served in the General Assembly or any leadership capacity that I've ever had, being in a nonprofit or my civic organizations, or being a pastor, whatever, they can pick up the phone and call me and text me, and I will make sure that all of y'all have my number before this call is over, because we should never get too big in our own head to think we're so important with all of our education and training and resources that we can't be closest to the people, especially the people who elect us and vote for us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your answer. We'll yield the floor to Dr. John Eves for his response.
Yeah. So the first question is straightforward. I mean, we all are Democrats and we will all support the Democratic nominee. There's a sole person in that slot now, and that's Stacey Abrams. I have a good working relationship with her. I want the citizens of South Fulton, as well as those of us on the call, to also understand the historical moment that we are on or at right now. As one of the panelists mentioned already, in this race, you have 4 Black people who are running. All of us are qualified. Obviously, some of us feel that some of us are better qualified than others, but we are all qualified. And we are running because we believe that Georgia deserves to have diverse representation. We have the percentages in terms of the population, 32% Black. Why not have a Black Secretary of State? Why not have a Black governor? Georgia can be in this unique position where a Black person is elected. In this position, first time ever in Georgia, first time in the Southeast since Reconstruction, there was one person elected in Mississippi around 1870, and nobody's been elected since. So I just want the citizens to see those of us on this call as people who are all qualified in our own unique way. And we are matching up with the diversity of our state. And so not only do we have the opportunity for electing a Black governor, but we have the opportunity for electing a Black Secretary of State. In terms of coming back to South Fulton, 2 things, as was stated by one of my rivals. Certainly, if one of us proceeds on to the runoff, if there's another invitation, we'll be here. I'm juggling like all of us on the call of juggling. I got me some event in the background here in Gwinnett County, but I'm juggling, but I wanted to be here because I thought it was important.
30 seconds remaining.
And the other thing I wanted to say is, in terms of any sort of potential development and whatever for South Fulton as a city, you know, I've got institutional knowledge about South Fulton when it was an unincorporated area, good, bad, and different. I certainly could be a resource. So I thought that was 2 good questions. So thank you so much for the opportunity to respond.
Thank you.
And this will be our last round of questions before we enter into closing statements. And so with that, we'll start with Dr. John Eves answering this next question, followed with Mrs. D. Dawkins-Hagler, close with Mr. Michael Owens, and then we'll do closing remarks in reverse order from there. So with that being said, would the question please be asked?
Sure. This next question comes from Ms. Kai Burris. If Stacey Abrams becomes governor, would you work with her to reverse the gun law that Governor Kemp recently put into place?
So I shared the good news earlier about the potential of having a Black governor and a Black Secretary of State. Certainly I would work with the governor-elect in any capacity that's consistent with Democratic parties and my own party and my own belief. In terms of the gun law, I certainly disagree with it. It's dumb. It's only going to add to problems of crime in our communities. South Fulton is really suffering like many other communities across the state of Georgia. Young man was shot in Welcome Park a few days ago. So I'm against it, but I think in terms of repealing the law, at least in the short run, it's unlikely because the legislature will still be controlled by Republicans. So the unfortunate thing about the governor being Democrat is that if you have a Republican legislature, that person is going to be limited in terms of fulfilling his or her agenda, or in this case, her agenda. But certainly I will do all that I can to support the governor and do all that I can to prevent the senseless violence that's happening in our communities, especially in our Black communities, and also especially in South Fulton.
Thank you so much, Dr. John Eves. We're going to yield the floor for Mrs. D. Dawkins-Hagler.
Thank you so much. I actually agree with John. See, what has happened now is we have a situation where the Republicans have majority. And when when you have majority, you can do all manner of bad and evil and vile things if you are not really for the people. And so right now, there is no way to repeal that bill unless the General Assembly flips. And so what you can do is you can continue to lobby. Nothing is ever too late. Especially, I think that we will win quite a bit of seats in this election, hopefully. And then you can go back and lobby and see if we could flip some of the Republicans over to Democrat seats, because it happened when we were there. The Republicans switched from a Democrat to Republican, and maybe that they'll feel that swoop from the top down, from governor all the way down to public service commissions, and they'll want to come back. But I still would help the Democratic Party fight to make sure that people have some type of precautions in place and requirements to own firearms in this state so that we can have a safe state. One good thing about all of this is when we elect Stacey Abrams as governor, she would have veto power. So even if they would have passed that bad bill in the House and Senate when she was governor, she could have vetoed it. And so that's what we got to work for now, making sure that she's there to give veto power for any of the trickery and foolery that is bound to happen when they get very upset. They still cannot control the demographic shift in this state because our population is steadily growing and theirs is decreasing. So that's fine.
Thank you so much, Mrs. D. Dawkins-Hagler. And with that, I'll ask Mr. Michael Owens for his response.
So the question of would I work with Leader Abrams to repeal the gun laws? Of course, right? I'll be supportive in those measures. Look, I think we've gone way too far with where the gun laws are in this state. I'm a Marine Corps veteran. I also grew up in the country. I grew up around guns. I served in the United States Marine Corps and carried guns every single day, which means I understand and I respect them. I think part of the challenge that we're having is that we need to do more to have actual gun owners speak instead of allowing gun lobbyists to speak. I know there's a lot of Black people that own guns as well. But the voices of the few are drowning out all these sensible people when it comes to gun ownership and gun accountability and gun responsibility. But let me focus on this. I want to be clear about what I'll do in office. This is not a legislative role. So it's not about how I will vote on this or that. I really want to be focused on the things that I can get done. Yes, I will lend my voice in support of democratic measures where they need to be, but I want to focus on things that can get done without legislation or a whole lot of litigation, because those things take time, as Dee was just explaining. And we've got to have a Secretary of State that's ready to hit the ground and start making measures work now. And so, I'm going to focus on fair, free, secure, and effective elections. I'm going to focus on shortening our lines at polling locations. I'm going to make sure we do follow the law and not have more than 2,000 people at each polling location to get things go through quicker. My goal is to ensure that we have huge turnouts, some of the largest turnouts in modern history in the state of Georgia. Those are things that I want to focus on. Those are things that I can get done as Secretary of State. I'm not going to go to become Secretary of State, just get marred down and fighting for things that's going to take years to be able to solve when we've got issues right now.
30 seconds remaining.
That's it. Thank you.
Awesome. Great responses from our candidates. Let's all hit the reaction and give them their thumbs up, their claps, their whatever you decide, because we have to really be grateful for the time they've spent. That's something that they can never get back. And so they've given us a great opportunity to get their perspective and their stance on a variety of issues. And with that being said, we're going to give each candidate 3 minutes to offer their closing remarks as we bring this town hall to a close. And as we begin in alphabetical order, starting with Dr. Eves, we'll end in alphabetical order, closing with Dr. Eves, and we'll start with Mr. Michael Owens, followed by Mrs. D. Dawkins-Hagler, and close with Dr. John Eves, with words from a representative from the South Fulton Coalition to close out the evening. And with that being said, I yield the floor. To Mr. Michael Owens for his closing remarks.
It's on me. Okay.
Yes, sir.
So thank you all again. Thank you, South Fulton Coalition, for putting this together and having us here tonight. You know, in 2018, President Obama declared election systems part of our critical infrastructure, part of a cornerstone of our democracy, meaning that it has national security implications. We know that elections have consequences. And we all agree that elections are a cornerstone of our democracy. We understand that election systems and all the problems that we've seen throughout the years, in many, particularly of our metro counties, where lines have been 4, 5, and 6 hours long. We've all argued and complained about when election machines go down and aren't available for people. You know, when you fill out your ballot online and it doesn't come back, or you fill out your absentee request, doesn't come back in time. These are fixable issues that we're dealing with. But in order to do so, we have to have someone that has the experience and the expertise to deal with those challenges that we have. President Obama making elections part of our critical infrastructure and something that we've all agreed to. My simple premise of my question is this: then when are we going to elect someone who actually has that skill set to be able to handle those challenges, to be able to deal with not only the domestic, but the international threats that we face as well? My goal as Secretary of State is to do just that, to ensure that we have safe elections, to ensure that we have efficient elections where we're not standing around in lines for hours, to ensure that we are doing the things necessary to allow people to get in and out of polling locations and ultimately have people's voices heard. We all know how hundreds of thousands of people have been purged from the voting rolls over the last several years. Again, I work in a space, my career has been built off ensuring that we can have systems that work, but that systems that we can trust. I want to continue to do that as the next Secretary of State. And as from a business perspective, ensure, as I said before, that we make sure that Georgia is the #1 state for everyone to do business in. That means Black businesses, brown businesses, women-owned businesses, minority-owned businesses, and veteran-owned businesses. We can do this. We can bring a new transformational aspect to the Secretary of State's office. But in order for us to do so, we have to elect someone who is transformational and different. You know, my grandmother used to tell me, show me your priorities and I'll show me your budget and I'll show you your priorities. I want to make sure our money is spent on ensuring we make it easier for people to vote and we expand access to the ballot as much as possible. I have concrete solutions and ideas I want to put on a table that I can roll out day one. I have 20 years experience in dealing with critical infrastructure that will allow me to do this. I'm a business owner. You guys know that I've built the largest Democratic committee in the state through hard work, vision, and sacrifice. I'm willing to do the same thing as your next Secretary of State. Please reach out. I'm asking for you on my birthday, being here with you this evening, to spend some time. Go to my website, check out my bio, look at the opportunities and what I have to bring to the citizens of South Fulton. Look at the work that I've already poured into your community and will continue to do so. So again, my name is Michael Owens. Thank you for your time this evening. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for being part of this. Democracy means nothing if we do not have people taking part in it. So thank you, South Fulton. I look forward to your support and ultimately your vote. Thank you and have a great evening.
Thank you, Mr. Michael Owens. And I'd like to add this for candidates. As you're not speaking, please type your name, your website, anything you feel is important, attach files in the chat while the other candidates are speaking. And with that being said, I will yield the floor to Mrs. D. Dawkins-Hagler.
Thank you so much. Thank you to the moderators. Thank you for the questions. And just thank you to everyone who's actually listening on today, because that shows that you care about our democracy. I'm not going to get on and make any promises or talk about things that you've heard being said redundantly over and over again. But what I will say is check my record. My record speaks for itself, and I have receipts on everything that I've ever said. And so I'm willing to offer myself to serve you again in this capacity as Secretary of State. I ran in 2018 and came up short, and so I'm running again. Why? Because I was sick and tired of being sick and tired. I'm tired of us being the voice for everyone and carrying the water for every other group except ourselves. Georgia is unique in that 33% of our population is African American, which means we have over 3 million citizens in the state of Georgia. With $64 billion worth of buying power, we're always asking people to do stuff for us instead of it being ours by divine right for the fact that we pay taxes and live here. And so I know what it's like to be a leader, to serve in leadership positions. Every single position that I've ever been in, every organization, I've always risen to the top as a leader, whether it was in the General Assembly, being there 1 week, a matter of 5 days of session, they promoted me to be an assistant deputy whip my very first time in the General Assembly, chairing a women's caucus, chairing the Black caucus, being a national leader for all of those organizations, serving as a state director for women in government, serving as NC National Council State Legislator and the national organization as a national officer. Whether it's in my sororities or my civic groups, I'm always the president or a regional officer on the national committee. Why? Because people understand a leader that doesn't just talk about it, but they be about it. And I think that we've had too much talking going on from too many people for too long. And the reason why we keep fighting the same battles over and over again is that we keep giving away our power when we haven't even solidified our own base within Black people. Well, for me, enough is enough because I am qualified. I'm a qualified Black woman who has to work extra hard, no matter the fact that I have 4 degrees, that I have more policy experience than anybody else that has ran, whether or not I have had more work experience in corporate America or nonprofits. We are still always trying to make excuses for everybody else and giving them a chance instead of saying that Black people are competent enough to serve in every single capacity from the top of that ballot to the bottom. And so I'm telling you, I've been in there. I know the trick. Some people might want to say it's not a legislative position, but Secretary of State is, because you've got to get along with the same good old boys who make the rules day after day after day, who do not care about us, because power never concedes power. It never has, and it never will without a demand. And so I'm just asking y'all to trust me, to know that I will get in there and go to work, regardless of who's sitting at the table and who's not, to make sure that our issues are represented. Because as Black people in this state of Georgia, we have paid our price. We still don't have our reparations. I'm still waiting on 40 acres and a mule. And the Democratic Party cannot function in and of itself without Black people going to the polls to vote. So I thank you for your time tonight. It's time for us to get to work. I am the woman to get the job done. I am D. Dawkins Hagler, www.dfordgeorgia.com. And I hope that you all would join me on my way up to try to be the Secretary of State of Georgia. And I promise if you vote for me, I will make you proud. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mrs. D. Dawkins Hagler. And we will close with Dr. John Eves.
Thank you so much, Mr. Moderator. Great forum. Thank you for the opportunity. South Fulton Matters. Thank you for providing this forum. I teach at Spelman College. I didn't mention this in my intro, and I teach from a very practical standpoint. And what's happening in Georgia and across the country is really about slowing down, minimizing, diluting Black political clout. And Georgia is at the threshold of 32% of the population being Black, have the opportunity to really elect qualified Black candidates in many statewide positions. And so this, these laws that are being passed are designed to reduce the percentage of voters who are Black, to stop more Black people being elected in the state of Georgia. That is what this is all about. Having said that, I believe that I am the most qualified person to be the chief election officer in the state of Georgia, based on my background, based on my demeanor, based on my principles, based on my values, based on my willingness to be fair, and based on my desire to let the chips fall where they may, in terms of people who are voting in the state of Georgia. This is an executive position. We didn't speak about some of the other important parts of the position. We focus mostly on voting and also a little bit with small business development. But this position also oversees 42 licensing boards These are architects, dentists, lawyers, architects, doctors, etc. There's an opportunity for the new Secretary of State to push more of an inclusive nature of how these licensing boards operate, to make the licensing professional organizations or entities more diverse and up to 21st century standards. There's another area called the securities area that we didn't talk about at all. This is the bank regulatory standards, this is private equity financing, et cetera, commercial real estate. That's another area where Black and brown people are tremendously underrepresented in terms of only 3 Black banks in the state of Georgia, very few Black people in commercial real estate, very few Black people in private finance or equity finance. As your Secretary of State, I'm going to deal with the whole aspect of the position, the 4 major areas. Voting is important, small business development is important, but licensing and securities are also important. And in those other areas, many of those other areas, Black people are tremendously underrepresented in terms of representation, in terms of benefiting from what is available here in the state of Georgia. So I see the whole aspect of the
30 seconds
office,
remaining.
and I will certainly have the skill set, the background to do justice in this position and to be to have an impact on local communities. So again, thank you so much for this opportunity. Great job, team. This has been a very thoughtful forum, and South Fulton is definitely on the election map with us.
Thank you so much. And with that, we're going to have closing remarks from Ron Booth of the South Fulton Coalition.
Thank you, Yofi. I'd like to thank everyone for attending this meeting. I want to let you know that a recording of this town hall will be available later tonight on our website or at latest first thing in the morning. Please consider joining South Fulton Coalition. You may visit us at southfultoncoalition.com. I also want to let you know that our next town hall is tomorrow, April 28th, for State Representative of District 58 with Park Cannon and Brandon Tunge. And a big thank you to our candidates, Dr. John Reeves, Ms. D. Hawkins Hagler, Mr. Michael Owens, and Mr. Floyd Griffin. Thank you for taking time from your campaigns to speak with us. Have a blessed evening, everyone. Don't forget, early voting starts May 2nd. Please vote. Thank you.
Have a good night.
Thank you.